What's up, guys? This is Kefis.
Today we're going to check out the macro that I've created for Enhancement Shamans in the War Within. Now, with Enhancement Shaman, you have a lot of options when it comes to your build, with your hero talents and also just with what the talent tree provides. There's so much to it. And so what I've gone with is a Stormbringer hero talent build that kind of doubles down on the storm side of the Enhancement Shaman tree. So we don't go over builds much in the video. I don't actually look at the talent trees anymore. We try to get right into the macro, but you can check out my talents, my build in the talent section of the macro, and you can import the string into your talent tree if you want to, but you'll see what abilities we are actually using when it comes to the macro as we go through this here. Now, I also want to say with Totemic, I just kind of felt like it was easier to go Stormbringer. It seems to be a little bit more powerful as well. It tends to perform better. So that's what I've gone with here. But if there's enough interest in the Totemic build style and play style, I can always revisit it down the road. But for now, I feel like it would just be easier to go with this. If you want to go Totemic, the rotation probably won't be that much different, and you probably won't pick that many different talent trees from what it looks like. There may be a few changes here or there, but for the most part, it's going to be basically the same. With the Totemic ability, though, it's a Surging Totem, which is a ground targeting ability. That's one that might be something that can be pulled off. Like I said, I'd have to mess with it more. But for now, what I would recommend, because of how important it is to the playstyle of Totemic Enhancement, that you just kind of use it on a separate button and then just use the macro. You could probably still get away with it that way, unless you want to go with a completely separate build. So, but anyway, with all that being said, you could probably make it work for now. But if I get enough requests, like from people, maybe in the comments, let me know what you think. I can always revisit the Totemic playstyle and maybe make a macro for it down the road. So yeah, please let me know in the comments below if that's something that you're interested in. But for now, let's go ahead and take a look at what we have here. This is my Enhancement Shaman all-in-one macro. It's going to do pretty much everything for you. And right off the bat here, you will see that we have a lot of modifiers here. Now, all of these modifiers that you see in this first block are going to be in every block because they're going to control how you spend your Maelstrom. So with Alt, we have Healing Surge, and you can do this to heal yourself when you have the Maelstrom, and that'll heal things up for you, of course. And then we have Shift for Chain Lightning. That's your AoE spender. And then Control for Lightning Bolt or Tempest. If Lightning Bolt changes to Tempest, then the macro will use Tempest. So basically, your modifiers are all there to manage how you spend your Maelstrom. Aside from that, though, everything else in the block, or whatever else is in the block, is just what the macro is going to do if you don't have a modifier held down. So we'll just kind of mainly be looking at the bottom line from here on out, okay? So the first thing here we have is Flame Shock. This is outside of our main sequence loop, which will be coming next. And obviously Flame Shock is one that you can use, pretty often. I mean, you can use it mainly to keep Flame Shock up, and then you don't have to use it nearly as much, but you can also use it as filler. But since it's something that you don't need to be using too much and has a relatively short cooldown, I kept it outside of the main sequence. And so everything that's inside of the main sequence, the macro is going to try to use more often than anything on the outside of the sequence. Basically, it's going to try to use everything twice as often that's inside of the sequence than anything on the outside. And we'll get into what's on the outside once we get through this sequence. So what I try to do is anything that has a shorter cooldown, like under 30 seconds, I put inside of my main sequence, because that way I'm giving those abilities more chances to get used over everything else. So that way the macro is not getting bogged down with abilities that have long cooldowns and nothing's actually happening when you press a button. That's kind of the idea there, and for the most part, it seems to be working out pretty well here. And so everything in here is going to be the macro is going to try to use more often. And so first up is Primordial Wave. This is probably our longest cooldown ability that's inside of the sequence. This one has a 30-second cooldown, so that's going to be the longest we have. But yeah, the macro is going to try to use that as much as possible. And then we're going to get into Storm Strike. Again, this is pretty important, especially with the Stormbringer side of the build. So that one's in there as well, obviously. And of course, we have Crash Lightning. That's a talent that we've chosen. Macro's going to try to use that one as well. And then we also have Lava Lash. This is kind of on the lower end of our priority, but it really doesn't matter because it has a pretty short cooldown. And again, we're going to be trying to get that Flame Shock going pretty quickly, so that way you'll get more out of your Lava Lash. And of course, same with Primordial Wave, getting that one in and then using Lava Lash as soon as we get to it. That'll also be pretty important as well. So those are all your kind of short cooldown abilities, and we get to the outside into everything else, and you'll see what we have here. So Doom Winds. This in the past has been a very difficult talent to macro, but it's pretty straightforward now. Has a longer cooldown, but the macro is going to be using it as much as possible. Well, not as much as everything that's inside of the sequence, loop, but it's pretty much going to be using it once it's available, and it'll keep it on cooldown. And that also would apply to Sundering. That one has a longer cooldown as well. This is a pretty fun little ability that'll deal some damage, but it has a long cooldown, so the macro is going to use that one. And then of course we have Ascendance. This is our longest cooldown ability. It's like a 3-minute cooldown, which is pretty crazy, but the macro will try to use that one as well. And so basically what's going to happen here is that the macro is going to try to keep everything on cooldown. It'll keep Flame Shock up probably more often than it needs to be honest, because of how short the cooldown is for it, but it won't be trying to use it as much as all of your short cooldown abilities, and that's everything that's inside of the sequence loop. And then of course we get to the outside where we have longer cooldown abilities, and the macro will try to use those only slightly less often. That way we're not wasting our button presses, and basically that's pretty much it, because this is pretty much a cooldown class. I mean, almost all of your abilities have cooldown except for your Maelstrom weapon abilities, and in that case you want to keep track of your Maelstrom weapon, which will stack to 10 with the talent build that I'm using, and then you will spend your Maelstrom on that. So basically you want to keep track of that. Now I have a weak aura tracker that's helping me keep track of it up to 10, which I can share with you guys. It's just something I found on Wago, and so I'll try to add a link to that in the description. It's nothing that I made, it's something that somebody else made, but I can still share it with you, and that way you can kind of easily keep track of it if that's something that you need to do. But aside from that though, basically you're just going to spam the macro, keeping everything on cooldown, and then keeping track of your Maelstrom, and occasionally clicking a modifier to manage those abilities that would spend Maelstrom. And of course, if you don't like to use modifiers in this particular case, then you can use all those abilities on separate buttons if you want to. So you can use Lightning Bolt, Chain Lightning, and Healing Surge on separate buttons, and you'd be fine. So that's something else that you are freely welcome to do if you're not a big fan of modifiers, and then the macro is just going to manage everything else for you. So with all that being said, it's a straightforward video, pretty easy. This one's pretty great. I mean, you have a lot of control over the things that you need to have control over, and then everything else is pretty much just going to be used on cooldown. The priority may not always be perfect. Obviously, that's something to be said with any macro, but that's really the only thing. Like, maybe there might be a hesitation on an ability that becomes available and it doesn't get used right away, but it'll get used pretty quickly, because this is, like I said, just pretty much a cooldown class, pretty straightforward, pretty easy, just that you have to use modifiers to manage some of your abilities. Otherwise, it's really straightforward. So yeah, anyway, let me know what you think about this one down in the comments below, and with all that being said, I will see you guys on the next one.
Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, let me know by clicking that like button. And feel free to share it with your friends so they can enjoy it as well. And if you'd like to see more videos, you can subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to be notified as soon as new videos are posted. You can also follow me on Facebook, and if you'd like, you can support my work on Patreon. Links to all that stuff can be found in the description below. This is Kephis. Until next time.